happy with that. As soon as they hit Flash, that's the last straw, because they cannot access content, they cannot access videos too well.
Yeah, the odd thing about Flash is it's one of these examples where the lowest, not necessarily the lowest common denominator, but not the best technology, has won out. I mean, Adobe Flash is, stepping aside from the sort of proprietary nature, stepping aside from Adobe being heavily Windows and Apple orientated, stepping aside from that, Flash is not a video format. It's an animation format. It's a format for, interfaces, for buttons, for interactive applications on websites and little games. That's what it's for. But what most people associate it with is videos, because every video site you can think of has chosen Flash. And it works. It's not great, but it works. So yeah, it is strange. Certainly, I don't like Flash, but I prefer that to Silverlight. I remember when when Microsoft first started to push that, the various sites were not choosing that off their own back. They weren't looking at Silverlight and saying, this is better technology. They were looking at that and saying, Microsoft are paying us, so we're going to switch to that. We're getting some financial benefit or some other connection somehow to switching. And even then, they found after a while that they were having too many problems with it, and they went back to Flash again. I would rather they use something else, but they were going back to Flash. At least for all its ills, at least Flash is not discriminatory in saying we're going to exclude Linux users, albeit there is the patent thing and all that. But at least there's a version of Flash. So.
Right. Well, the only thing I would add to that, and I think it's already probably been covered, and we certainly covered it many times on many of the episodes of TechBytes already, was the only time I had any experience of Silverlight was I saw it once on a NASA site, I believe. It was some sort of Mars website where you could explore Mars, and it required Silverlight for that.
It wasn't funded by Microsoft, I should add. It was to do with Microsoft's involvement directly, so they had to choose something which would exclude you from, as a U.S. taxpayer, you would expect to access freely and easily the things you paid for, but they took over some parts of NASA, and lots of example of things they did inside NASA which are inappropriate, and this is one of them, where they supposedly fund a project that they try to describe it as them reaching out to students, I think, or crowdsourcing to the audience, but only if you get the plugin from Microsoft. So this is just a promotional thing for them. The NASA name next to Silverlight, just as they did previously with the Obama administration when they had one of the big kind of conferences. They had to really, really loudly promote, look, Obama is using Silverlight, and if you want to watch your president, you have to install Silverlight. And if you use BSD, or at the time it was GNU/Linux, Moonlight wasn't ready and things weren't working too well, so you cannot see your president unless you buy from Apple and Microsoft. That's wonderful, isn't it?
Well, the only other time, I don't know whether that NASA site's still in operation. I actually stumbled in it only by accident, and so that's how I saw they mentioned the Silverlight there. And the only other reference to it was when some of the terrestrial channels in the UK, as was said before, we facilitating it to show their on-demand services, which now have all reverted away from it again. So that really, Silverlight was always a non-issue for me, and Moonlight held just about as much interest as well.
I want to point out something very quickly, though. As far as I can tell, I've been watching the whole situation with the BBC and the iPlayer since around 2006, as far as I can remember, even before it was making its debut, and people were talking, especially in the Inquirer, about what would be involved in, giving people access to the archives of the BBC. So one of the things that happened then is people were outraged even before it was launched, and then there was the period where they had to supply access without the application for Windows only. And then they were looking for something more web-based. Eventually, of course, they chose Flash, but at one point, I read in The Guardian, they were looking at Silverlight, but they didn't choose that. I think they realized it would cause too much backlash from the public, which was already quite angry because they couldn't get access to the content they paid for as taxpayers. Uh, Now, one thing I should just recommend, if you do have to access Flash, do try to install Ganesh, because I installed it on my work PC where I have Fedora 14. It's very, very easy to install now. It wasn't easy to install before. I did try many years ago, and it wasn't quite so simple. I basically gave up after a while. It's easy to install, but one of the issues then is once you've installed this free software, as you can imagine, if you go to YouTube, you need the codecs, which are in some cases proprietary, or perhaps you could get substitutes in free form. But I was kind of discouraged to think, okay, so I'm trying to avoid Flash, I just installed free software, and now to watch the video, I need to decode MPEG, and now I have to get some proprietary software. So I basically kind of just left it aside and said, well, I don't need YouTube anyway. And but it's possible to install that. And once you do that, and I did test quite a few complex sites with Flash, I mean, Ganesh works just perfectly well in all of them. It just does the animation, it does the ActiveScript is the language they mostly use at the heart of the thing.
Yeah, action script.
So it works just fine. I mean, it's really mature now. What I kind of worried about is they sought some funding recently. They did a kind of not really a fundraiser, but they kind of basically said, well, to ensure we can actually continue developing anything, you have to try and support us financially. The other thing is, I'm not sure we will have Flash in many websites very soon. So I'll tell you, from my experience, lots of people, once they go to YouTube and they don't even click anything like WebM. They use Chrome or they use Firefox, and it just detects, oh, you're using a browser that has WebM support in Firefox 4.0 or in Chrome 8 or 9 or whatever, and it will just play it straight away. It doesn't look for any Flash plugin. It just plays the video straight away. So people say, why is this Flash thing? When do you install it? What do you need it for? And people say, oh, some sites, they have Flash. Not for videos, for, I don't know, bouncing objects or whatever. I think it's become extremely unfashionable anyway to have Flash. I see lots of sites that we see, even viewers of PDF files, become very HTML oriented. Things to do with drawing and interacting with the users become based on HTML, as far as I can tell. I can think
certainly the thing with Flash is it's usability wise. I mean, even setting aside the resource, the CPU, hammering the CPU and all that, accessibility wise, it's horrendous. I mean, before I even knew what Linux was, I used to build things in Flash, not that advanced, but Flash with ActionScript and stuff. And there's no way that, for example, screen readers can read the content. If your stuff's in Flash, forget it. I mean, when I've been building sites for people, and I've had the person who I'm building a site for, they're saying, oh, we could put an animated banner in or an animated sidebar. So that's fine, but don't do it in Flash. You know, do it as an animated GIF or something like that. Just don't do it in Flash. But I
disagree with you because they think they know better what looks good. And then you explain to them about search engine. I've been in this experience before where I had to build a person, I had to build a site with Flash. A site that's purely in Flash will just be one page, which usually contains like nothing as far as the search engine is concerned. And
Yep.
Google only start to index in some kind of way, like look inside the Flash, but it's very disorganized, and you cannot deep link. That's really important. So if you have a certain web page or so-called, page, it's not exactly a page, it's just part of a binary. That's a page, let's say the about page in the website. Even if you point to the website that has this page, it will go to the opening sequence of the whole object. So you have no way to go inside, the pages. So maybe Flash is fine for, I know some people even use it for spyware. So they kind of have a Flash object somewhere because they know they can grab some cookies off you and try to sniff your cookies and do things with it. And they have a very tiny object of Flash somewhere. It's extremely malicious. And people tell you have to put some rules in especially in the Linux box, you have to put a cron job to delete your cookies because anybody can tap into your history, what you've been watching, what you've been doing, who you are, what your screen resolution is, and they can grab these info by just having a tiny 1 pixel by 1 pixel type of object in Flash somewhere in the page. which is extremely malicious. You don't want this type of stuff on your browser even.
Yeah, I think the thing with the choice of Flash and Silverlight, I understand